Welcome to the podcast, The Change Agent, where we are exploring all things related to leadership, management, technology, and more. Our goal here is simply to provide you with insights, stories, and tips to help you achieve project management greatness, improve your team's performance, help you to become a better leader, and help you and your team simply rock it. I hope you're looking forward to today's episode, so let's get to it. Welcome back and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. Now, this is a different season, of course, and what we tried to achieve in Season 1 was to give you the foundational concepts of leadership and becoming a good leader, how to recognize bad leadership, how to address problems, and address the challenges within the world of project management. But the biggest difference between Season 1 and Season 2 is that Season 1 was all about the foundational mindset of being a good leader and all of the general foundational ideas of being a good leader and a good manager. Go back and look at some of those podcast episodes to see if they apply to you, but they're really, really good. And they're going to be important for you as you move into Season 2, because Season 2, we're going to be looking at the practical applications of project management techniques. These would be things that we find in the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or PMBOK guide from PMI, Project Management Institute. Things you might find from Scaled Agile Frameworks or Safe Agile. This would be Agile methodologies and the Agilist mindset. And what we're trying to do now is build on what we did in Season 1 so that you can start applying actual technologies and techniques into the actual work of doing project management. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the podcast itself. I've not been doing this for years like some, but this podcast is different because we go on real world exercises as our impetus for what our content is. And I would think it's very difficult to argue that my 30 years of experience in leadership and management haven't provided me some experience through mistakes and through other things that I've been through that would be of a value to you based on the lessons I've learned, how I've become successful, and how I failed and what I did in response to that. While there are plenty of others out there that do the same thing, and they all have very good, valuable information, I think it's the openness and the experiences and the introductions to others in the field, which is the other point I want to make about the Season 2, is that we're going to be introducing interviews for impactful leaders around the professional field of project management, those that I've known, those that I've led, and those that have led me, hopefully, and those professionals in the field that have expertise in specific topics. Now, there are some personal perspectives I want to cover really quickly about project management. And there are some things about project management that may run through your head as you've gained that maybe you've been accepted as a project manager to a new project, and you're really starting to feel some of these. One of those might be the fear of responsibility. So the idea of becoming a project manager can be scary, I think. I know for me it was, and when I was going through training to be a leader, and that's early days in the Army, U.S. Army, and then eventually on to more professional roles as an actual project manager of large projects for a defense contractor, I had a lot of fear of responsibility. Not so much that I was scared of leading, it was more of, I'm responsible for this, and what if I fail? And so you have to go through that and kind of tackle that first, and that's much easier said than done. But there are ways that we could approach addressing that responsibility. I think one of those is being prepared, and we'll talk more about these later, but I think it's like being prepared, trying to go through and educate yourself, becoming as familiar with the project as possible and what it is you're just doing. What is the purpose of the project? That would be defined in your project scope. So if you've got a new project and you're trying to figure it out, you'd find that not so much the project scope, rather the project charter. So you'd want to go back to the project charter to see what the overall, like the high level project is all about, and then starting to look into the project scope statement and see what it is you're trying to do there. And then as we go through these seasons, we'll talk more about the actual artifacts of project management. The other personal perspective I think is really important that may cross your mind is, how do I lead my friends? Now, we've talked about this in Season 1 in some of those episodes, but really, for me, it was really about, I had grown through the ranks, and generally you don't go alone, right? You have individuals that you're friends with, you have individuals that you've um, done things with, you've got experiences with, and now you're leading and you may be responsible for them. And the truth of the matter is that can be really difficult. It can create a lot of stress between you and your friends. It can create um, animosity if you start to treat everyone equally when in fact you may not have been equal with everyone else. So it's very difficult to try to address all those things. And so you really need to get in there. And I'll talk more about this in just a little bit. The the core part of project management is understanding this particular foundational statement or question rather. Why is it even important? Why do we want to understand project management and why do we consider it important? Well, first, project management is important because it delivers something, right? It delivers something to a customer. And so it's very, very critical that you understand the concepts and the foundational practices of effective project management. And of course, this all goes out to being successful. Like you want to be successful in delivering this product. You don't want to deliver a product that gets returned to you or not accepted. You want to have something that is accepted, which makes you successful. You may want to achieve professional and organizational goals. In a professional world, you may want to be on your resume, you want to say successful project manager who's led projects at the value of whatever. But in this case, that's all great and dandy, but you may also have organizational goals. So your organization may want to be achieving some type of market advantage or get into a new customer or a new field, and they need effective project managers to help them get there. That would be where you're in. And then, of course, you want to grow personally, right? You want to build your resume. You want to feel like you've achieved something. And this is all the Tuckman's ladder bit, right? Where you have a sense of need and a sense of responsibility, and you're valuable to others, right? As you climb the pyramid from the most basic needs, which is food and water, to I feel valuable. So why a primer, right? This episode is particularly called the primer to project management. And so you may ask yourself, why are you having a primer to these future episodes in season 2, which is the application of techniques and tools of project management? Well, it's important, right? Because I want you to, this is really the transition from the foundational part of leadership and management over to the practicality of it, making sure that you're able to do it and how to connect both the empathetic part, the emotional part, your personal part, and the foundational concepts of being a good leader, because we have so little of that today, in my opinion. We need more leaders that are empathetic, that are caring, that are also brave, to connect that to the practicality of it. So I want to manage some expectations for the season. We will talk about I want to try to blend out the personal aspects and the empathetic or the emotional aspects of foundational leadership to the practical aspects of managing teams and employing techniques and tools that you might learn in educational development and educational realms like uh, boot camps or classes that you take or courses on project management. So all good for there. Let's get cracking. And the last thing I want to mention is that uh, even though I said we were going to have some interviews throughout the season, if we can get them, uh, I'm also going to start deploying out artifacts and reference information, reference materials related to some of these techniques. Because as I talk about them and I talk about tools and artifacts and resources that you could get to help you manage projects from various organizations like Project Management Institute and et cetera, you're going to want to see them eventually. So I am going to be putting those in the podcast section of the website. That website is www.kalinavision.com. That's spelled KALYN as in November, a-vision.com. And so you can go there. If I reference some information on the podcast about it and you want to go get it and download it and check it out, you can go get it for free on kalinavision.com in the podcast section. So let's get right to some of the primary course topics of today's episode. The first one we're going to talk about is the road to leadership. Now, this you may think that like the road to leadership was hard, or maybe it was easy. Maybe you didn't do anything and you got lucky. But generally speaking, you got where you are because you're reliable. You delivered stuff. You were seen as an expert, or you're super professional and you're just ready to get started in your management support your professional growth. But you might want to think to yourself, or you might be thinking to yourself, am I leaving my friends behind? This is a really difficult aspect, and I mentioned it in the intro, but leaving your friends behind is something that is possible, and you have to be ready for that. You have to have the bravery of saying, I can be your friend, but I'm going to be fair and impartial in both awards and punishments, as they say in the military. But most of all, and I explained this in several occasions in season one, is you have to be consistent in your decision making. You have to be predictable for those that follow you, right? And a good leader is not an unpredictable one. A good leader is a predictable one. If I do something good, I know exactly what you're going to do. And if I do something good, I know exactly what you're going to do, or at least try to do. If any of those ambiguities follow those things, your people are going to have real stress following you. And it's going to be difficult to lead them and motivate them and provide that purpose, motivation, and direction. Now, there are some ways you can get around this. You can start asking for input from those that are around you, those that are, and when I say around, I mean in all directions, your peers, your subordinates, and your managers. Ask them for input on how to manage those that are closer to you, their friends. You can get them to mentor you, and you can also get yourself prepared for what some problems you might experience as you go through and start leading these peers of yours. Now you've gone from the individual doer and contributor to a leader, and when you do that, it's inevitable that you're going to end up leaving something behind. Something won't be able to follow you. And that could be, how do I lead my friends? It could be, where do I find my mentors? It could be, I'm not ready. It could be a bunch of different things. But one of the more important things you can do, and probably the easiest thing you can do, is get ready for what problems you might have. Problems that you may experience as you become a new leader and you jump into that new role and you're on that road to leadership is, what do I do if I get into an argument with someone? What about my personal dedication to achieve goals and to do things? It's important that you are prepared for those, how we manage them. So let's take the first step in leading and managing. First thing you want to do is you want to get in there early and start developing confidence. You just want to get to it, right? Just do it, as Nike says. You can do it. You can do it. It's much, much easier than it looks. It's not as hard as it seems. One of the best things you can do is get education, getting used to learning, taking the self-discipline and putting it into, I'm going to dedicate some of my time that I want to be personal. I could be golfing. I could be outside working in the garden. I could be sleeping. Taking that and changing it. 15 minutes is all you need to learn something, because remember that knowledge is power. And then start small. You don't have to fix everything, and you don't have to fix what isn't broken. Just start small, start moving. The other thing you need to recognize as you begin your travels in the leadership world is that empathy is absolutely key. You have to understand it's important to walk in a mile in another person's shoes, to make some type of quote there. But I would say the other thing too that I learned, and I would beg that you listen very carefully to this, is that you want to react to today tomorrow, not crises. I mean, if you have crisis is going on and everybody's up in a thing and you've got a natural disaster, that would be different, right? But I'm talking more about like insults to you or bad behavior on your team or whatever that is. You want to react to today tomorrow. So that means not right away. Take your time. There was a story that I've got a couple of them where I didn't do that. And so I was in Afghanistan in 2005, and I was located in the Kandahar area, and I was leading a small unit of 4 individuals in cartography. I'm a cartographer, geographer, GIS person, geospatial by trade. That's what I grew up doing. And I had some individuals working for me, and I was young as a leader, and I had not learned all these principles yet. And I was moving along, doing my thing, and I had my own personal issues that were making an impact on the way that I lead individuals, how I interact with individuals. I was more reserved, et cetera, and I was kind of withdrawn. as often happens to soldiers and sailors and all of our armed forces who are in combat situations and stressful environments. But so were my other individuals, so were my team members, and they were dealing with their own thing. And one day, this guy comes in, and I happen to have been uh, 5 minutes late, I guess, in transition to relieve him from his shift. And I walked in the door, and you could feel the energy in the room. You knew something was wrong, and I immediately sensed that we were going to have an issue. Now, I was already in a kind of a bad mood just because I had my own personal issues going on. And when I sat down, I kind of tossed my bag over to the side, and I said something like, well, I'm sorry I'm late, something like that. And he took it offensively, or at least the tone of it. And he said, maybe you need to stop acting like a little bitch. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I reacted immediately to that. And it really kind of blew up into an issue that involved many other people outside of our little group. And it just made it very awkward. We ended up resolving that. And years later, we talk about it and laugh about it. But the lessons that we learned is that we both shouldn't have reacted immediately to a situation, especially when we both had invisible um, actors pushing on us and making our day worse. In essence, he didn't know what I was dealing with. I wasn't talking to him about my personal issues so much, though he did know about it, and he wasn't really talking to me about his. And so when these things are invisible, they're um, ingredients to a problem you don't even know exists yet, and so you need to be careful about how you react. The second story is not too long ago, I had a manager, and the manager called up, and I've always kind of felt like maybe we weren't as connected as we wanted to be, especially since the COVID days were over. We kind of stayed remote for a while, and we had some issues being successful in communications, and so we had to do those things where we were more remote than anything else. And um, I had a lot of, I would say, personal issues about the lack of communication, and I immediately, uh, during a conversation we had where I took something that this individual said personally, it it caused me to vent out what I had been feeling for quite a while because I wasn't communicating. And so again, in that very moment, I should have waited. I should have been able to catch it and react to it tomorrow, what I was feeling today, but it didn't happen, and it created a situation. Thank goodness for me. I would say for the both of us, it didn't really impact our relationship. And if anything, it made it probably a bit stronger because we grew to respect each other. And I was very apologetic about it afterwards. And I realized my mistake and I went on about it. So, again, it's really important. It goes back to the foundational idea of, hey, react to today, tomorrow. So now there are some mistakes that you're going to make that are often made through new leadership. And it's important that we recognize some of the most common mistakes that are right up front for new leaders. Now, you need to realize that leadership is not micromanaging. Leadership is guiding. You have moved, again, like I've said before, you've moved from contributor to leader. So the one thing you don't want to do is start micromanaging, because you need to know that these individuals you've now dedicated these projects to, or these tasks to, or you're delegated something else, you need to trust that they've got that. You need to build the trust. And the way to do that is through small steps. And we'll talk more about that in a second. This is trust building, right? Building small trust. Get the small wins, get the early trust building, the foundations for trust on the way. The other one that you could obviously, what I think makes a big impact, is the failure of consistency. And I talked about this before just a few minutes ago. You need to be consistent. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you don't say it, don't do it. And if you say you mean to do something, make sure you drive the impact on those things. You need to, hey, Bob, I promise you, I'm going to try to look into getting a raise for you. And make sure you go and you actually investigate that, and you give that feedback to that individual within a couple of days on whether or not you'll be able to do that. Or even better, maybe you talk with your functional managers and your leadership about the possibility of doing that before you mention it to Bob. That's probably the best way to do it, actually, is to get it in place first and then do it. But at the end of the day, if you want individuals to understand what your leadership style is, and you will reward them for good behavior, it's very important that you tell people that you intend to give them rewards. And if you do say that, then get to it. So be consistent. Say what you mean what you say. Now, let's get ready. Let's get set. Let's get professional. What does that even mean? So it's important that we understand that we, as project managers, can say that we're good all day long. We can have a resume that's filled to the brim with accomplishments and experience, but you need some certifications. I hate to say it, you do. You need to be certified in some things related to project management. And some of those certifications can revolve around the PMI, the Project Management Institute. This is the PMP certification. You can get Agile certifications from Scaled Agile Frameworks. So you can have things like the Scrum Master certification or Agile for Teams or Release Train Engineer or whatever those are. So you want to be looking at some of those. ITIL, that's what it's called now, but it used to be called ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library, but now they just call it ITIL. It's not as hard as the PMP, but it's very applicable to customer service and service-based type contracts. And if you're trying to get used to customer service like help desks and all those types of things, ITIL is really important. Study, listen, and engage. Listening to this podcast is a great start. So continue to do that, of course. And then you want to develop through failure. Try things, experiment, learn fast. You don't have to make large commitments to some type of large change to your leadership style, but you do want to try to experiment with way leadership styles work, and making sure that you're ready to go. So figure out what works, figure out what doesn't, see how you are as a leader, and then see where you can get to by trying new different things and what things work for you and which things don't. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the project management practice. So there's book smart and then there's street smart, I guess we can call it. There are things we're going to learn in books as you go through the practical application of project management. And the PMBOK guide is exactly that. It's the project management body of knowledge. And inside of that, there are guides to how you lead projects. There are guides to how you can implement your inputs, techniques, tools, and outputs, those ITTOs, how you can use lessons learned, how you can use historical documents and expert judgment and expert knowledge to get you underway and make your project successful. You can read periodicals and you can even start teaching others about things you've learned from lessons that you've had, which is what I just did for what feels like 40 minutes. It's only been 10 minutes or so of this podcast about teaching you about some of the mistakes I've made. And then as we've gotten those things and we understand we've got some knowledge there, we've got something we can put our hands on, we want to get underway. So you want to think about how your team appears to other people. That might be something. I mean, you hear people say all the time, your children are a reflection of the parents. And so your teams could obviously be a reflection of your leadership. Not in every case, but in general, that's, speaking of, that's how it would look, right? So you want to think about how your team appears to other people. Are you dysfunctional? No one communicates. Everyone's angry. You have a large amount of attrition. No one wants to achieve. They do the minimum. No one volunteers for leadership. Are all those the aspects of what's going on in your team? Because if so, something's really wrong there and you want to get rid of it. You also want to think about, as you get underway, how you're going to manage your time and your tasks. It's really important that you have a methodology and an idea of how you're going to do these things. Will you be using a day planner, a physical one, or a digital one? If you use digital, will you be using OneNote, Apple Notes, Evernote? Will you use no notes and just try to wing it? Bad idea. So you could do that. Will you have Post-it notes on the wall in a Kanban style where you have them under columns of to do, doing, and done? Who knows? Again, this is the experiment, learn fast methodology, right? You want to go through and try to fail and see what works so that you can stop it, get to the next idea, and start moving. Okay. Criticality of all of this getting underway bit is building that trust. And I talked earlier about starting small and building up. Those small, quick successes build support faster, and they help build trust development faster in your teams and throughout your management teams. The last bit, you don't want to give up if you fail. Giving up is not an acceptable practice. You need to get up and get cracking. You need to deal with the moment and not the past or the future, and base everything that you see on what you know to be true, not what everyone else thinks, and not your assumptions, right? So as you get started in project management, get tactile, strong primary sourced information. Know what's real and what isn't. What are the assumptions, and you can document those. In fact, you absolutely should, and write those down and get them started, because, or at least get them in the books, because you need to really, 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 really base everything on facts. Base things on what you know. Okay. And all of these ideas will help you get started as we start applying what we learned in season 1, the foundational concepts of strong management, being a good leader, being a good manager, recognizing the bad stuff, and getting them into practical applications of project management techniques and tools. So as we go forward, that's what we're going to be focusing on, is getting these things applied and start using these real tools. So the season 2 will now be us applying actual practical knowledge from things like the PMBOK guide, based on our knowledge of becoming a good leader. So now we're a good leader. We know what good management looks like. We do it every day. Now we're ready to start applying it. Okay. And remember, empathy is key. Walk a mile in another's shoes. See them as you want to be seen, and treat other people with respect and fairness. It's not hard to do. It's absolutely free, and it doesn't do anything to you by doing so. And you never know just what impact you can make by being kind to someone. You don't know what other people are going through. They're in their own little world. They're doing their thing. And one day you come up and you say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? It looks like something's bothering you. You care to talk about it? And if not, let me know if you're ever ready. Be happy to help. And you never know what that little bit of kind gesture is going to do for someone. So let's close this first episode of season 2. If you found it helpful, subscribe to the podcast and make sure you leave a review, and share the show with your colleagues and friends and other mates at work, and make sure you provide us with some recommendations on how we can improve. I really want to try to get the podcast as applicable to you as possible and talk about the things that matter to you. If you'd like more information on how to engage with me directly, you can head over to kalinavision.com. Mentioned it earlier, but it's KALYN as in November, A-vision.com. And also you can catch me on YouTube at Beyond the Glare, or your favorite podcast platform, to learn more and see how I can help you and your team get to the next level. Thank you for listening, and until next time.